Have you ever opened a decision email from a journal, seen the words revise and resubmit, and felt relief and panic hit at the exact same moment? Have you found yourself reading reviewer comments over and over, unsure whether or how to start revising? Hey, co-authors. In this episode, we're talking about R&R anxiety, the strange in-between space where your work isn't rejected, but it hasn't been accepted yet either. We unpack why R&Rs can feel uniquely destabilizing, how uncertainty can fuel overthinking, and why even seasoned scholars struggle to interpret feedback without catastrophizing. So let's dive in. So earlier in my career, I was working on a project with a bunch of co-authors, and we had submitted the piece to a journal and got, as is the standard, a couple months later, got back the decision letter, and the decision letter opens up with the phrase, "Your work shows some promise and with extensive revisions may rise to the level of being accepted to this journal." I was like, oh my gosh, that's the most backhanded email I've ever received in my entire career about an R&R. Like whenever I get a revise and resubmit decision or an R&R, I'm usually pretty happy with that, right? It's very rare for anyone to submit work and get it accepted just from the word go. More often than not, you're going to have to go through at least one, maybe even 2 or 3 revisions before it gets accepted to any particular journal. And you might find yourself doing multiple revisions across multiple journals until your work finally finds a home. But whether you get a really complimentary and nice R&R letter or you get one that was kind of like mine, you might be in this space where you are faced with the things that the reviewers want, the things that the editors want. You know that you're on the right track of getting your work published into a journal, but you also might not feel completely sure about the direction that you want to take to make sure that your work gets in and gets accepted. And of course, what is probably the least helpful thing of all this is that there's that little voice in the back of your head that keeps whispering to you, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. You've got this pressure on you from yourself, maybe co-authors. Certainly you're having pressure from the reviewers and the editors. And so what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about how to address R&R anxiety and how to make sure that you're being successful in the process of a revise and resubmit. So let's dive in. Are you interested in mastering scholarly writing, developing productivity, and increasing impact, all while staying healthy? Then welcome to the Publishing Academic Research Podcast. My name is Dr. Kyle Ruddick, and I'm a full professor and writing coach who's dedicated to making sure you break through whatever is stopping you from reaching your scholarly goals. I meet so many scholars who have creative, innovative, and daring ideas, but can never seem to get those projects from proposals to print. I want you to get your work in the hands of people who will read it and appreciate it. So let's get into this week's big idea. The first thing that I would say before we even get into the problems here is that an R&R, for the most part, is kind of a conditional yes. Yes, it is possible for you to have an R&R, do a revision that is not good enough, and the editor may end up rejecting the piece after an R&R. There's a few reasons for this. One, it could be that you got an R&R because the editor might see an original idea, some promising take, feel like they have the leeway to take a chance on your work. It might be that your work's kind of on a knife's edge on whether or not it's a good fit, whether it's strong enough in its design, whether it's well written enough for that to be a part of the journal, but the editor might be taking a chance on you. And if it comes back and it's not really hitting the things that the editor wants, you might get a rejection. It's also possible that the revisions that you do are not good enough for what the reviewers or the editors want. Maybe you went in a direction that they didn't want you to go. Maybe you didn't fulfill the things that they want in a particular way. It could be that there's some fatal flaw that was in your work, and so they gave you an R&R in the hopes that you could address that, and you couldn't, so now we have to reject it. And there's a lot of things that are going on here. It's very rare, though, that if you have a very strong piece and it's been given an R&R, that it's going to be rejected. I think for most editors, I can't speak for all of them, obviously, but my journal that I've been editing gets over 400 submissions in a year. I can't send all of that out to reviewers. If I do, my reviewers are going to quickly revolt on me because that's just too much work for them and not everything is good enough to merit their attention. And so as an editor, my take on it has always been that whenever I'm in doubt on whether or not to send it out or not, I err on the side of not sending it out and giving desk rejects. I think that is kinder to authors. It gives them a decision quickly, lets them move on to a better journal, one that's a better fit for the project they have. It's more protective of my reviewers who are doing this work as a part of their service and are not being directly compensated for it. The vast majority of things that get submitted to my journal are things that I'm going to desk reject. There could be something that comes up afterwards, but for the most part, if it's been given an R&R, it's on the way for publication. So that's the first thing to think about, is that it's a conditional yes, and that can give you some anxiety and some uncertainty. But given the journal, the editor, and the field, I would say an R&R is a good place to be, because most journal editors recognize that reviewers' time and resources are finite. We are not going to waste time giving R&Rs and using up more of those resources on things that don't have a very good chance of making it to print. So if you have an R&R, congratulations. You are taking probably the first step towards publication. That's a good thing. But, whenever you get this R&R, you're going to probably have some pretty common emotional responses. First, I hope that you have just elation. The first thing that you should do whenever you get an R&R decision, do a little dance in your office, do whatever it is that you do to celebrate, right? And just really just kind of take a second and really just take 10, 20, 30 seconds and really just bask in the fact that you have made this step in the right direction with your manuscript. And especially if this is the first time that you've gotten an R&R in your career, that's even more reason for you to celebrate this, because now that means that you're starting on that path of getting past, getting desk rejected, and getting to a place where journal editors and journal reviewers are seeing the merit in your work enough for them to invest the time and resources to make your stuff publishable. So take a moment and celebrate that. But you also, on the heels of that, are probably going to feel a little bit of anxiety. And that anxiety is going to hit once you scroll down in the email past the decision and you start reading reviewer comments. And you're immediately going to be in this place of catastrophizing whatever it is that they've said. Maybe you're disagreeing with them. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you're frustrated. But at the very least, you're anxious about this place that you're in, because even though there's a really good chance this is going to find publication, you might be getting asked to do things that you don't know how to do, that you don't want to do. And there's a whole lot of things that are going on here. And it's important for you to be able to work through that. So then what are some ways that we can start to get in a better place with our reviews and resubmits? So first off, I would say it's really important for you to not do anything about the feedback and about your paper whenever you very first get that decision letter. I would just encourage that whenever you get the decision letter, don't even read the feedback. Don't read it. You've gotten the decision. Bask in the happiness that you've gotten an R&R decision. At the end of those 24 hours, read the feedback. Take some time then to process it. I would say if you're a morning person, read it in the morning. If you're an afternoon person, read it in the afternoon. Don't read it whenever you're at your worst. Read it whenever you've had your coffee, you've had a little bit of something to eat, you're not hangry, you're not going to say or do anything stupid like write a mean email back to the editor on something that the reviewers have said. You're in your Zen place, right? So you read through that feedback, give it some time to marinate, give yourself an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then think to yourself, is the feedback that they're asking me to do things that I can address? If so, then at that point, you want to email the editor back, say, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate this. And I intend on making revisions and submitting by whatever the due date is that they've given you. For our journals in our discipline, turnaround for revisions is usually 30 to 45 days. So you can say the exact date, or you can just say, I plan on having this back to you within 30 days or 45 days or whatever it is that's the turnaround for the journal or in your discipline. But you want to let the editor know that. The reason for that is because editors are looking to stagger the things that they are accepting so they can fill every issue. Some publishing companies have a minimum amount of articles that they want to see per issue. Other ones have a maximum amount of articles they can have per issue. So depending on your discipline and the journal that you're going for, your editor really needs to know whether or not you intend on completing your revisions. So after you've sent that back and you've told them that you're going to do that, now it's time to take stock of what it is that the reviewers have said. Now that you've made that decision that you're going to do that, what I would say is the next 24 hours should just be you talking with a trusted colleague, whether they're in your department or outside of it, and see if they might be willing to help you to be a sounding board for ideas, read an outline, read a draft. Make sure that you have people in your corner before you even start the revision process. You don't want to start writing a whole bunch of stuff and then realize you don't have someone that you can talk to. But that's the first 48 hours, is you not making huge decisions yet. You're not trying to knock all the revisions out. You're not even trying to really do anything with the feedback. You're making very deliberate, very conscious decisions about how you're going to execute the next 30 days or 45 days of your time on this manuscript. And so making sure that you've given yourself time to celebrate, contacting the editor, and making sure that you have a support group, that you have at least one person, maybe even a whole group of people who can help you as you're moving forward with this project is really, really important, because a lot of times scholars think that they get an R&R, they have to go off into the wilderness, hide in some cave, kill a chicken, read its guts, try to divine the right path forward all on their own, so that way they can get this thing from an R&R to a publication. And none of that's going to be helpful. What you need to do is make sure that you are taking slow, deliberate steps in this process and that you have a support group that can help you navigate these things. Now that you've done that, let's get into how to read the letter that you're getting back from your reviewers. The most important thing here is being able to separate the actual content that you need to follow and the sort of noise that's around it. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by noise is if someone says something good, bad, or indifferent to you, some sort of snarky comment or something like that, that's noise. That's going to get you up in your head. That's going to make you want to respond either out of fear or out of anger. None of those things are good approaches to revisions. Instead, you should be looking at the revisions to see what out of this are the tasks that I need to accomplish in order for me to reach my goal, which is publication. So a lot of that's going to come down on your ability to suss out whether or not changes that are being asked from you, from the reviewers, are those required changes or are those optional changes. And as you might imagine, most reviewers are not trained, and so they're not going to tell you which one is which. What I would say is that issues that have been brought up by both reviewers are absolutely required. There is never a reason whenever both reviewers land on the same issue in your manuscript that you should not be addressing that. Other things might be optional, right? It depends. Is it a fatal flaw in your methodological approach? Did you apply the wrong statistical test? Did you not account for certain variables? Did you not analyze your interviews or focus groups in a coherent and credible way? There are things that are fatal flaws that even if only one of your reviewers brings up, it's still not good. But I think a lot of times authors think that everything that a reviewer says is a change that needs to be made. And that's not the case. Provide suggestions to authors. They are not the editor. And so ultimately, any feedback given to you by a reviewer is a suggestion. The other thing to think about is the reviewer feedback coming from a place of disagreement or is it coming from a place of confusion? So is it that you've done something and the reviewer said you did that wrong or you should have done it this other way, in which case that needs to be addressed because that will be eventually a fatal flaw in your work? Or is it about reviewer confusion? So did you write something vaguely? Did you not provide enough detail? Could you have explained this or that a little bit better? That might rise to the level of being a fatal flaw if that confusion is about a methodological choice. Because it's not clear to the reader, we don't know if we can rely on your interpretation of the data. But 9 times out of 10, reviewer confusion comes from poor writing on the author's part. So most of the time, reviewer confusion can be addressed by tightening up your prose. And if you go back, I have a lot of episodes on how to make sure that you are writing in a way that really conveys your meaning and is impactful for your reader and for your reviewers. So I won't spend too terribly much time on that in this episode. But what I will say is that reviewer confusion is a eminently manageable issue for you as an author. If you've done some methodological choice and the reviewers don't really like that, it's not easy for you to just go back and completely redo your experiments, gather a whole new group of interviewees, completely reanalyze all of your artifacts, whatever it might be. But it is very easy for you to tighten up prose and to make sure that it's conveying what you want it to convey. If reviewer confusion is going on, then you want to make sure that you have that, again, that social support group who can read your work, give you feedback, and make sure that your work is shining before you send it in for your R&R. Also, and the last thing I'll say about how to read things from your reviewers is that as an editor, I will send a manuscript out to 2 or 3 different reviewers. Sometimes I'm lucky and both reviewers are very well versed in that area. But more often than not, I have one person who's very well versed and one person who is not so much. What I mean by that is to say that not all comments carry equal weight with an editor whenever it comes back. I've had instances where the person that I think is really an expert in this area and that I really trust is like, I don't think this is good enough. I think this should be a reject. The other person who I don't feel quite as confident about is like, oh, this is great. This should be a minor R&R, maybe even an accept. I have in the past just rejected that. Some editors might have given that an R&R because, oh, well, you have an accept, you have a reject. So the middle of that is a revise and resubmit. But that's not always the case. Sometimes I will look at what a reviewer says and go, yeah, I think that your word carries more weight in this. The flaws that you have identified, I agree with you. They cannot be rectified. And I'm just going to reject this piece. I'm not going to waste more reviewer time on it. And so make sure that as you're reading through the work, try to get a sense of what your reviewer's expertise is vis-a-vis the thing that you're writing about. And know that if a reviewer says something that's absolutely ridiculous, it's a bad ask, it's a stupid ask, or it's counter to what it is that you're wanting to do, then there's a good chance that the editor is not going to pay much attention to that comment anyway. So now that you've read through the review and you've kind of started to figure out what it is that you want to do with that feedback, what's your next step? Well, the third thing I would say is that you should make a to-do list. You need to take all of the reviewer feedback and change what is probably written in a more narrative style and put it into a bullet point style. These are the tasks that you need to accomplish in order to get this manuscript to the next level. Sometimes if I get a lot of comments, I might separate that into a section called substantive changes and another section called editorial changes. So the first one is things about content. The second set of bullet points are like grammatical mistakes and citation errors and stuff like that. If I have a lot of major content revisions to make, then I don't make any of those editorial changes because I might end up changing content to the point to where spending time on those editorial changes might not even matter because I might delete that entire section or I might move things around to the point to where that feedback is not helpful anymore. On the other hand, if I feel like the content changes are not very big, I might just go through and knock out all of those editorial changes, just so that way I can just kind of get that sense of momentum and kind of get this idea of like, oh yeah, I know, like today I sat down and I knocked out 10 things off my list. Now they were all probably small things on the sort of like line by line edits side, but that still kind of gives me a good feeling that I've knocked some things out and marked them off my list. So going through, making sure that you have done that. And what I would say is that whenever you upload, depending on your journal outlet and what your editor wants you to do, most journals are going to ask you to upload an anonymized file and a file that has all of your contact information in it. The former will go out to reviewers. The latter is for the editor. I would say that you should upload 2 anonymized manuscripts. One that has all of your changes to your manuscript as tracked changes, whether you've done that in Word or Google Docs, or you just underline, bold, or highlight the things that you've added or edited. You need to have one version of it that has all of those changes that are made easy for your reviewer to see. But you should also upload a clean document. I just recently reviewed a piece where they made extensive revisions to the piece, but they just uploaded a track changes document. So what ended up being a 30-page document after they had accepted all those track changes. Whenever I very first got it, whenever it still had those track changes in it, it was like 50 pages because it was like 20 extra pages of all of this stuff that had been moved around, deleted, added. It was a mess. I couldn't hardly read it because there was just so much that had been done to the manuscript. That's not fun for your reviewers. And if you as an author are uploading that, you're making it harder for your reviewers to review your work. That's not going to be in your benefit. In my case, it took me weeks before the editor was able to get me a clean copy. And as a result, I was weeks overdue on the review. And so that was the authors then waiting for weeks longer than they should have for my review because I didn't have a document that I could read. So if you're doing a revision and you're sending in stuff that is a track changes document, you're making it harder for your reviewers. You should not do that. You want this process to go as quickly and as smoothly as possible. Send in both a clean and a track changes document. The last thing on your to-do list should be to develop your cover letter. And here, what you want to do is take that to-do list that you created and write out to your reviewers and to the editor how you addressed every one of those points. Now, again, addressing does not mean that you made a change based on reviewer feedback. It could be that you disagree with your reviewers, and there are different ways that you might couch that. Very rarely, but there are instances where you might say, you asked us to do this other thing, and we're not going to do that. If that is the case, if you're going to just absolutely not follow what a reviewer has said to do, then it's important for you to have citational evidence as to why you're not going to do that. So if it's methodological, you need to cite the statisticians or the methodological text or whatever it is that you're drawing on that would tell the reviewers and ultimately the editor why you are not following that advice. Similarly, if it's a theoretical or philosophical thing, you should be quoting extensively from those primary sources and detailing why you're not going to do the thing that the reviewer has asked you to do. Again, I would say that's more rare. The whole point of having a review process and sending that feedback back to you as an author is that the editor on some level co-signs onto what the reviewers have said to you. And so you have to make sure that you're being very careful about picking your battles, because it's very possible that you are not just disagreeing with the reviewers, you're disagreeing with the editor as well. And so you need to make sure that you come fully prepared to defend your choice if you're not going to follow it. On the other hand, there's a lot of editors out there that, in my experience at least, are not very good editors. A lot of them really care about their journals. A lot of them really watch everything that's going on between reviewers and authors, but there are some that do not. And they get the reviews back from their reviewers. They just send it on without a thought to the authors, and then vice versa whenever the authors submit things. And they just don't really see themselves as getting involved in that process other than to be the email person in between authors and reviewers. I actually think that's a terrible way to be an editor, but whatever. Sometimes you're going to deal with that person. So that being the case, for you to disagree with a reviewer is going to be bringing something to the attention of an editor who might not actually have read the reviews, and we don't really know whether they agreed with the reviewer or not before they sent it to you. So again, it's a risky proposition, not always a bad one, but a riskier proposition to outright not follow reviewer advice. The second thing that you can do is you can always say, hey, you asked me to do this. I've done it in this spot, or I've added this citation here, or I've added a footnote here. Basically, what you're doing is playing an appeasement strategy. They've asked you to do X, and your response to that is how little of X can I do and still get this published? You also are just kind of, okay, we'll play the game here. You want this particular person cited? Sure, why not? I'll throw in a citation. It's not really changing anything about the design or the impact of your writing. It's not changing the findings or the conclusions. You're really just playing this appeasement strategy. And yeah, it sucks, but you know what? Everyone in every job that has ever been in human history has on some level had to look at something and go, yeah, that's not what I want to do, but I guess if I want the thing that I want, then I'm going to have to do it. And academia is no exception. Here we are. As long as that's not altering your study design or your findings or your conclusions in any significant way, it's okay to do that. So don't feel like you have to defend everything that you've ever done or everything that you want to do in a piece, as long as it's not substantively changing your work. And of course, even if you're following the advice of your reviewers, in your cover letter, you should be detailing not just that you did it, but how you did it. So be as detailed as possible in how you address things. And you don't have to address like editorial things. If they said you missed a comma at this sentence on page 9, you don't have to write back to them, we fixed the comma. What they really want to see are the content or the substantive changes that you've made, right? Making sure that those things are reflected in your prose and that you are detailing exactly how you did those revisions in your cover letter. Overall, then, what I would say is that as you're navigating reviews, it's important to remember that all of this is up to the editor. You are not there trying to please reviewers necessarily. Sometimes you are because, again, some editors are not good editors and they just kowtow to whatever reviewers say. That's not a good editor. The reason that you are an editor is because it's your name that goes on to the journal. You are the editor. You are, on some level, tacitly co-signing everything that gets published in the journal as long as you're the editor. Reviewers, that is not the case. Their names are on the editorial review board, but that's not the same thing as your name as the editor on the journal for however long that you are serving in that capacity. Editors then have a vested interest in making sure that whatever gets published is the best work that can be published in that outlet under their tenure. And so you should come into this process with the knowledge that you are making an argument, not necessarily back to the reviewers, but to the editor as to why the changes that you've made or have not made are in the best interest of the piece and ultimately in the best interest of the journal. I would also say that depending on the type of discipline that you're in, you might find it productive to reach out to the editor and see if there are ways that you can address certain types of feedback. I've talked about this a little bit before, but I will say it's important if you do this one time, don't bug editors. But if you have questions, you can email that once to them And that might be, hey, I've got reviewer A and reviewer B that are asking me to do two opposite things. What do you want to see? Or the reviewer said to do this. I don't understand what it is that they want to do or how it is that I'm supposed to do that in the types of constraints that I have in this piece. What's your advice here? Those, to me, are absolutely legitimate questions. If I get an email, on the other hand, that's, you've made a decision to reject my piece, I need you to justify why you made that decision. As an editor, I will either probably say, well, read the decision letter, right? Like, reviewers and my feedback is there. That's probably why I made the decision I did. Or I'm just going to ignore it because I don't have time to argue with people who want to be argumentative. But if you come to an editor with good intentions and with the idea that you are going to have a better piece by getting these answers, then most editors that truly care about their journals and making sure that the best scholarship gets published while they are the editor, are going to be there in your corner and trying to help you as much as they can. An editor should not guarantee that if you follow their advice, that it will get published. That is tainting the review process. Just because an editor told you to do X, Y, or Z doesn't necessarily mean that the reviewers are going to like that. And even though the reviewers don't have ultimate power in this, if the editor tells you to do something, you do it, and the reviewers are like, that was the dumbest thing to do ever, why would you do that? Then unfortunately for you, the editor is not going to tell the reviewers, well, I told them to do that, right? Instead, they're going to go, oh, well, sorry, sucks to be you. They're going to reject your piece, and then you're going to be left there holding the bag. And them's the breaks, right? But again, most of the time, a good reviewer is there in that position because they have the experience to know whether something is worth pursuing. That's why they're in those positions. And so it's absolutely okay for you to reach out and get advice from them as long as you don't bug them. Okay, so that's going to be about it for me, folks. As always, I appreciate you listening as you're starting up the new year and hopefully a new semester. I hope that you're doing well. Your classes are all prepped. You've got your reading lists ready to go. Your assignments are all ready, and you're going to hit the ground running whenever the semester starts, if it hasn't started for you already. If you find yourself in the semester and you're looking for someone that you can talk to about your scholarship, work through some ideas, by all means, reach out to me. My contact information is in the podcast description. You can set up a free 30-minute appointment with me. I'm happy to talk with you about the projects that you're working on, the things that you're going through, anything that I can do to be helpful for you. Please reach out to me because I want to make sure that you are doing the best work that you can and that you're pursuing publication ways that are joyful and sustainable for you. Okay, so thank you so much, and I will see you in next week's episode. Hey, co-authors, what's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let reviewer 2 get you down.